With the Trump assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, it wasn't just Trump that dodged a bullet. I think the nation dodged a huge bullet. Let me explain why. This is probably some of the most disturbing things I've heard in a while. Hello everyone, Dr. Chris Martenson here. I want to cover this, why the they in this story had to be stopped. And the they is the DC Blob, the permanent state, the whatever has sort of grown up that really honestly is independent of party, although certain party affiliations sort of flip-flop around on this as to who's in charge and who's doing what. This was a Joe Rogan interview with Marc Andreessen, a VC entrepreneur kind of guy. And this really shocked me when I heard it. I had to sleep on it for a couple days to really think it through, but let's listen in on this together because this is really something.
The AI thing was very alarming. We had meetings this spring that were the most alarming meetings I've ever been in, where they were taking us through their plans, and it was
like what kind of? Can you talk about it?
Basically, just full government control, like this sort of thing. There will be a small number of large companies that will be completely regulated and controlled by the government. They told us. They just said don't even start startups. Like don't even bother. Like there's just no way. There's no way that they can succeed. There's no way that we're going to permit that to happen.
Wow.
Yeah, they said this is already over. It's going to be 2 or 3 companies, and we're gonna control them, and that's that. Like this is already finished.
Oh my God! Yeah. Now, when you leave a meeting like that, what do?
You go endorse Donald Trump.
All right, nice diffusing of that, but consider the implications of what you just heard. Marc Andreessen, very famous guy, Silicon Valley, represents what Silicon Valley's been up to, and of course, as you know, Silicon Valley was the centerpiece of the censorship industrial complex that we've been talking about for a long time. Yours truly, amongst many others, fell afoul of that, fell victim to this censorship complex. And it's fundamentally a very weak approach to life. Because if you can convince people of your amazing worldview, if you can convince people of your political arguments for or against something, well, then you're a strong person, right? That's the power of persuasion. But when you are a weak person, you seek to shut down your opposition. You cut the tongues from the other people in this story. If that doesn't work, you destroy their lives with lawfare, and if necessary, with warfare itself. This is fundamentally an exceedingly weak direction to go in. And Marc Andreessen was suitably horrified when he was called in to say, hey, here's our big plan. Our plan is it's just going to be the government plus a few big companies, and we're going to run the whole thing. That's fascism, but fascism on steroids, because these big companies, of course, own all the data, and this data has been funneled through AI and cognitive warfare algorithm routines that have really been able to slice and dice this thing, myself individually, yourself individually, but separating families from each other, getting people fractured and angry and just being rats in a cage fighting each other while they walk out the back door with all the money, all the wealth, all the power. Of course they loved this thing, but surprisingly, they brought him in and said, hey, you in? Because this is what we're doing. He said, no, I am not in with that. This is the censorship industrial complex right here. And just behind my image here, let me just show you the whole thing. There. So now you can see big tech, which would be, Google, Facebook, all those cats in there, LinkedIn. I got censored by, let me see, Twitter was censoring me for a while. TikTok, absolutely. Google, of course. Facebook, haven't even tried. We got kicked off of there a long time ago. And I don't do as much on Instagram, although I could. But yeah, censored by all of them at one point or another. Now, Twitter, of course, X being a new free speech bastion within that. But it's this larger ecosystem. It includes NGOs and the so-called fact checkers, the Poynter Institute and the Washington Post and the AP and all those odious, nasty organizations doing anything but caring about the truth. What they care about is enforcing their vision and version of the narrative. And the narrative has nothing to do with the truth. We've covered that extensively, of course. And then you have all your government agencies and your for-profit and your academic initiatives with all these lefty organizations, Stanford and Harvard, just contributing willy-nilly to the absolute destruction of free speech. Actually, the academic initiatives went further. They wanted to attack free thought. Because, of course, who cares if you give people free speech if already you've attacked their ability to have free thought? What's free thought? I'm allowed to think whatever I want to think, knowing that I can say it at some point And if I know I can't without getting heavily censored, without losing my job, without losing my freedom, as is happening in the UK now, then I am going to back way up and censor my own thoughts. In fact, if you can instill in people at an early age that it is absolutely not okay to even think certain thoughts, then you've controlled free thought before you even had to worry about controlling free speech. And that is what the academics have been up to, which of course is just about as ridiculous as the fact checkers in the mainstream media working against their own best interests. Because in academics, it's supposed to be about quality of thought and expanding the minds. And they're working directly against that, which means they're working against their own self-interest. It's just bizarre. To say I have very little respect for it is as kind as I can possibly be. Same for big media. Now, I started to wonder about this. We've been talking about this back at Peak Prosperity in our subscriber community. What is this explosive rise in AI data centers, data center, NVIDIA? Oh my goodness, we're going to have these data centers. Well, if the plan was for the government to work in cahoots with these big data companies to provide that level of AI control over the whole thing, well, now this makes sense. And in particular, we now understand that when we see government transparency and accountability, we're going to want to look into, are you listening, DOGE, Viva, Elon and Vivek, right? You're going to want to look into this because I'm going to guarantee you there have been secret government payments to these big tech data AI centers in order to help them get over the goal line faster. That's what I think we're seeing in this, that explosive rise is not just, oh, there's this incredible business case for AI. This has got public money in it, behind it. By public, I mean, basically it's private money of, by, and for the blob, who's already in power, taking my money and giving it to these people so they can make sure that I have to give all my money to them in the future without any complaint or ability to complain. So remember, this is how powerful it was. We have Sam Altman, the consummate nerd geek, who kind of looks like casting central for somebody that somebody should send somebody back from the future from in a dystopian AI movie to stop him from being who he is, right? He's like, I think somebody from the future should come have a discussion with Sam here. Here he is with a couple of really swampy looking guys right behind him here. I don't know who they are. At any rate, talking about how, wow, we're going to have these 5 gigawatt data centers. How much is 5 gigawatts? Well, an industrialized city of 1 million people might consume 3 gigawatts. That would be 3,000 megawatts. That's the number you're reading down there. So more than a city. He's talking about, oh, we need centers. We need many of these things. We need basically the equivalent of entire, like millions and millions and millions of people's worth of electrical consumption to power AI. Now, that was never really explained exactly why we would need all those many gigawatts, but you can see the swamp creatures right behind him are like, oh yeah, we totally need this. Now I understand it. Remember the U.S. Energy Secretary Granholm, who I have low respect for too, saying in September that, oh, well, now we can see the need for small modular nuclear reactors, cheap, abundant, reliable power. Now that the data centers need it, now I think I see the need for that when humans needed cheap, reliable, abundant electricity. It was hard. There was oh my gosh, the rules, and it's very complicated. And think of the politics. Can't do it. But now that she's been apprised of the fact that we need this for the data centers, we understand it. And here's why. Mark Andreessen, again, this whole interview, just explosive, but let's listen in on this next part.
It turns, according to Gemini, Hitler had an excellent DEI policy.
Yeah.
Now, in reality, he did not. And it's important to understand that in reality, he did not. But yeah, Gemini happily threw up black Nazis because they programmed it to be biased. They programmed it in a political direction. There's this guy, David Rosado, who's been doing these analyses on the social media side where he shows the incidence rates of the rise of like all of the woke like language like in the media. And there's similar studies that have come out for the AI where there's studies that have been done that basically show the political orientation of the LLMs because you can ask them questions and they'll tell you. And they're just like 9 out of 10 of them are like tremendously biased. And then there's a handful that aren't. And then there's tremendous pressure. This is one of the threats from the government is the government basically going to force our startups to come into compliance, not just with their trade rules, but also with all of their, right, essentially a censorship regime on AI that's exactly like the censorship regime that we had on social media.
Wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, and this is my belief and what I've been trying to tell people in Washington, which is if you thought social media censorship was bad, this has the potential to be 1,000 times worse. And the reason is social media is important, but at the end of the day, it's quote, just people talking to each other. AI is going to be the control layer on everything. Right. So AI is going to be the control layer on how your kids learn at school. Right? It's going to be the control layer on who gets loans. It's going to be the control layer on does your house open when you come to the front door.
Wow.
It's going to be the control layer on everything. Right. And so if that gets wired into the political system the way that the banks did and the way that social media did, like we are in for a very bad future.
We are. We're in for a very bad future because humans are predictably bad. That's just part of it, right? That's why the founding fathers gave us 3 branches of government, but a fourth, a state, which is supposed to be the press. And it was supposed to be that each of these was sort of overseeing the other and creating a check and a balance on the other, because anytime you have unchecked power for any group of humans, they predictably go off the rails. We call this, if power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, is the saying. So this is absolute power, no accountability. Nobody's going to be held to account for doing awful things with these things, predictably awful things. And we already saw this in action, and this is what we just dodged as a nation. So this is how powerful this idea of this control for them, right? Like, remember all these years they've been telling us, the same people have been telling us that climate change is very bad and, often lecturing us after just getting off their 400-foot yacht or servicing their fleet of jets, but telling you, the little person, that, climate change is this awful existential thing. We're going to have to do something about it. It's terrible. We're going to have to maybe accept limited travel. We're not going to be able to eat meat anymore. We're going to have to live in our little cities. We're going to have to get a social credit score through our credit card that's tied to our carbon consumption. Of course, not them. They mean you. But now all of a sudden, that it's a data center that needs this power, whoop, they just threw climate change right out the window, didn't talk about it again, and powering AI leapfrogs climate concerns. Why? Because the AI was going to be their path to glory. This was going to allow them to finally cement their perfect utopia of totalitarianism, this time with better technology. Communism, totalitarianism, yeah, it failed in the killing fields of Cambodia. It failed in the former USSR. It failed in Cuba. It failed in places only because they didn't have the right technology. But this is their new God, right? If we're rebuilding the Tower of Babel, this time they're building towards, if there is a God to these people now, it's technology. Technology is always a good thing. It's always positive. It doesn't have another side to the coin. There's nothing else to worry about. It's always unequivocally good. Brick phones from the 70s, 80s, bad. New smartphones, good. Ignoring the impact it has, say, on kids' development or dopamine or any of these other things, right? Their technology, the they in the story, the Blob, the Borg, the people who are into this totalitarian sense of, hey, we should be in power and control, not you, right? They all of a sudden just hot swapped out this one belief system, which is climate change, which is a means of controlling you for the most part. That's how they expressed it. Well, they say now it's become clear there's not enough low carbon energy to satisfy data centers' needs, and natural gas will be key. Natural gas is not low carbon energy. It's carbon that was in the ground that we took out of the ground and we burned. So it's like, it might be less than on a per kilowatt hour basis than coal, but let's be absolutely clear. It's not low carbon. It's not no carbon. It's carbon, right? And that's fine. I don't have an argument with the carbon, by the way. I just don't. So this just shows, though, the power of what they're up to, that their ideology, which they had invested a lot of money, brand building around this whole climate change carbon story, and then you just threw it right out the window when it's like, oh, is that going to conflict with our need for data centers? Which again, as Mark Andreessen just pointed out, it's a layer of control. It will control everything. Your education, your healthcare, whether you can get loans, what your social credit score is, it's control. That's what they wanted. Okay. So This is how ye shall know them by their deeds, right? So their deeds are, hey, everybody, climate change is climate change is really bad. Oh, no, it's really bad. Oh, do we need data centers? Forget climate change. Forget we ever said anything about that. Obviously, we need the data centers. I mean, who could argue with that? They can't even articulate why we need the data center so bad outside of this story I've just told you, which is about the larger censorship industrial complex. Remember that bubble chart with all the different players in there? This is it. This is the direction they're going. So for Mark Andreessen to say, hey, he was invited in this past spring of 2024 into the White House where they laid out their plans and they just told him straight up, hey, this is how it's going to be. Don't even bother starting up companies, because you know what we're going to do now? We're going to have this thing with just a couple big companies. They're the winners. Everybody else is going to be marginalized or prevented from taking root. And then this whole thing, we got it. We have the control architecture we need to go forward. And that's what they wanted to do. Now, as an entrepreneur, of course, I'm glad that Mark Andreessen was horrified, because you should be, because obviously, as soon as you say, let's encase this whole thing in lucite, here's the winners, here's the losers, here's how you rise through our party apparatchik, everybody else is going to be marginalized, lawfared, kicked out, not have jobs, potentially have to go to re-education camps or maybe even holes in the ground, right? That's the direction that totalitarianism has always gone in the past. Full stop, no exceptions, and this was headed in the same direction. So I think that what we did was we just dodged a huge bullet here. Now, if Trump had his head kept turned, kinked to the left there, we would be hurtling right now down this path of dystopian AI-controlled tyranny. And I don't think if that had happened and our Republicans had said, oh, well, I guess we have to use Nikki Haley, then it would have been the same outcome, whether it's irrelevant. Trump is the only thing I think that can possibly put a speed bump in this. It's no longer guaranteed, but that it's going to go down this dystopian AI-controlled tyranny outcome. But it's no longer, it's not guaranteed that we're not going to do that. There's still a lot of hard work before us. Turning his head a little bit, I think now we have the potential of healthy children and a rationalized government, which is the DOGE thing, Department of Governmental Efficiency, again, as referenced earlier, headed up by Elon and Vivek. So I think we all dodged a bullet, and this, like, again, watch this whole interview. It's just like shocking truth bomb after truth bomb from an insider. So let's turn now to this idea of being debanked. I talked about this a little bit on my live cast on the Signal Hour, but I got to dive into this just a little more right now.
So, for example, we have this thing called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, CFPB, which was it's sort of Elizabeth Warren's personal agency that she gets to control. Mm-hmm. And it's an independent agency that just gets to run and do whatever it wants, right? And if you read the Constitution, like, there is no such thing as an independent agency, and yet there it is.
What does her agency do?
Whatever she wants.
What does it do, though?
Basically, terrorize financial institutions, prevent new competition, new startups that want to compete with the big banks.
Really?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
How so?
Just by terrorizing anybody who tries to do anything new in financial services. And
can you give me an example?
Well, I could say, debanking. This is where a lot of the debanking comes from, is these agencies. So debanking is when you as either a person or your company are literally kicked out of the banking system.
Like they did to Kanye.
Exactly, like they did to Kanye. My partner Ben's father has been debanked.
Really?
We had an employee who
for what?
For having the wrong politics, for saying unacceptable things. Under current banking regulations, here's a great thing. Under current banking regulations, after all the reforms of the last 20 years, there's now a category called a politically exposed person, PEP. And if you are a PEP, you are required by financial regulators to kick them off to kick them out of your bank.
What?
You're not allowed to have them.
What if you're politically on the left?
Well, that's fine.
No,
because they're not politically exposed.
So no one on the left gets debanked?
I have not heard of a single instance of anybody on the left getting debanked.
Can you tell me what the person that you know did, what they said that got them debanked?
Oh, well, I mean, David Horowitz is a right wing. He's pro-Trump. I mean, he said all kinds of things. He's been very anti-Islamic terrorism. He's been very worried about migration, all these things.
And they debanked him for that.
Yeah, they debanked him. So you get kicked out of your bank account. You get kicked out of you can't do credit card transactions. By the way, you can't.
How is that legal?
Well, exactly. So this is the thing, and then you go in this thing of like, well, this is where the government and the companies get intertwined. back to your fascism point, which is there's a constitutional amendment that says the government can't restrict your speech, but there's no constitutional amendment that says the government can't debank you, right? And so if they can't do the one thing, they do the other thing, and then they don't have to debank you. They just have to put pressure on the private company banks to do it, and then the private company banks do it because they're expected to, but the government gets to say we didn't do it.
Wow, there it is, in black and white, so to speak. So you get debanked for being a PEP. A PEP.
I'm sorry for...
What's a PEP? It's a politically exposed person, and so there's like PowerPoints on it. This is from LexisNexis saying, hey, you know, we're going to help you identify PEPs so that you can streamline your compliance, right? It's like a whole thing now. It's just part of the architecture. That's how mature it is. This isn't like somebody just woke up one day and started debanking Canadian truckers or the UK politician Nigel Farage or 30 separate startups who are holding the wrong political beliefs. This is a weapon of, by, and for the current political party. And boy, are they going to scream if it gets weaponized and used the other direction. Can you imagine if George Soros gets debanked all of a sudden? I mean, it's going to be terrible. That'll be the worst thing ever. Oh, no, right? Maybe Bill Gates deserves to be debanked, but this has been a tool of political oppression and control. And it's like, look at this, like in yellow, conducting business with a PEP can have costly consequences. Significant multi-jurisdictional regulatory enforcements. Well, that sounds bad. Exorbitant fines. That's no good. Long-term reputational damage. Diminished shareholder value. Lost market opportunities and erosion, and on and on. Big list of stuff down there. And so you have all these international overlapping compliance mandates. You got your FinCEN regulations. You got your Bank Secrecy Act. You got the Patriot Act. You got the Act. All these things just to create this mesh layer so that people who hold the wrong political views or are working on a technology that you'd rather not see advance because, hey, you're Nancy Pelosi and you invested in company Y, and here's this startup over here attempting to compete with company Y. Well, I think they need to be debanked, don't they? It's in the interest of politically exposed person secrecy frameworks. It's gross. This is what we have hopefully dodged, but I'm not entirely positive. But look at this. This is so mature at this point. There's like tons of documents. I just pulled one from a random PowerPoint presentation I found. So you got your high-risk PEPs, level 1s. You got mediums at level 2. You got level 3 mediums, and you got lows at level 4. This includes at the top heads of state governments, assembly members of government at a national or regional level, head of the judiciary, law enforcement, military, top-ranking officials, central banks, political parties, and then you go down through, religious groups, officials, commissioners, ambassadors, then you're down to boards of directors, then you're all the way down to like mayors and city officials. I mean, basically anybody with any power or agency is now PEP and can be debanked if they are in the wrong group or holding the wrong view. This is obviously against the intent of the Constitution. The spirit has been violated wildly. And this was the direction we were heading down. This didn't just happen starting a few weeks ago. This is a very mature thing when you're full of like entire PowerPoints and consultancies to help you manage your compliance risks of PEPs, right? So I know people personally who have been debanked. They've been with like their B of A for like decades, and all of a sudden you get the letter like, we don't want to do business with you anymore. It's like, what did I do? 100% conservatives. Okay, just saying. So that's crazy. Now, thinking this through, so you're thinking, okay, that this Mark Andreessen guy, he must just be some kind of crazy Trumper. Let's catch up with his bona fides here, and then you're going to find out there's actually two types of people in this world now, and we're going to turn our discussion to that.
I'm going to get a lot of, the flack I'm going to get for this is, he's just a crazy, whatever, right winger. But like I was a Democrat. I supported Bill Clinton in 92. Ding. I supported Clinton in 96. Ding. I supported Gore, who I knew very well, Ding. In 2000. I knew John Kerry. I supported him in 04. Ding. I supported Obama. I supported Hillary in 16. Ding. Like I was like a Democrat in good standing. And then,
are you completely out in the cocktail circuit now? Like, are you allowed to hang out with people?
So there's now, this is actually true. There's now two kinds of dinner parties in Silicon Valley. They fractured cleanly in half. There's the ones where every person there believes every single thing that was in the New York Times that day, which, by the way, is often very different than whatever was in the New York Times 6 months ago. But everybody has fully updated their views for that day, and that's what they talk about at the dinner party. And I'm no longer invited to those. Nor do I want to go to them. And then there's the other kind, which is, David Sachs and like all these guys and all these people and, just this growing universe. It's a microcosm of what's happening more broadly in the culture, which is like, hey, let's actually get together and talk about things and have fun.
Right, but it's so much more comforting when it's you guys and not the MyPillow guy. You know what I mean? It's like, no disrespect, Mike, to the MyPillow guy. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I want people that are smarter than me to be saying these things. Yeah. That's what helps.
All right, so this is an important idea here that we've now fractured into two groups. And by the way, I'm recording this on the day after Thanksgiving, and you're going to probably, if you're normal and human, you've probably experienced this fracturing within your own family structure, right? Perhaps it's you that holds what's called a dissident view, or you have the wrong view, or maybe you support Trump, just like Mark Andreessen. You had some sort of awakening, and you came into this and you said, wow, this other direction is actually very bad. It's not life-affirming. It's going to smother the country. It's going to reduce happiness, prosperity. It's going to do a lot of things. I honestly believe that the direction we were heading was going to lead to miserable, impoverished people and a broken nation that ultimately collapse. It's in the process, I guess. That's why I've struggled. Is it collapsed, past tense, or collapsing, current, or will collapse, future tense? I don't know. But honestly, the direction we're going is very bad. Now, we're on a new path, potentially. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean anything more than just a speed bump to that other path, because that was the inevitable direction of things. Or we have a chance to turn the corner here. That's why the fight is on, folks, meaning it's imperative that you stick to the truth as best you know it, and that you speak that truth. Because, again, when you're in the midst of a mass formation, that mass psychosis, it's imperative that there are people out there who are willing to bravely raise their hands, say the things that are socially awkward in that moment, and help to turn the tide, because it is only those people who provide the turning point that allows us to steer away from the shoals in this story. So be brave, get out there, say what you believe to be true. You don't have to be angry about it. You don't have to be vituperative, explosive. You don't have to be volcanic about it. You can just say what you believe to be true. And this is the great split. The path to truth, it's narrow. Not everybody takes it. There's a lot of lies out there, but it's really between people. I think what Mark Andreessen has discovered and woken up to is there are people who value truth. And guess what? They're a lot more fun to hang out with. They're awesome people. It's a lot more fun to be out there in the world of reality and truth. Living in that comforting pack of lies, it's really not that exciting. Frankfurterly, frankly, it is, it's boring. One of the great sins of the woke movement to me was it was terminally boring. They would spout these things very angrily, a lot of emotion, and then have nothing to back their points of view up with. As he mentioned, as Mark just mentioned, these people faithfully believe whatever's in the New York Times, even though this may directly contradict what was in the New York Times just a few weeks ago. But they've updated their views to make sure they're holding to consensus views. Boring. And as you may have noticed, that same boring group has a hard time memeing and getting jokes or telling jokes. They're just like, have you ever watched like the woke comedians? Believe that was a genre for a little while. Terminally unfunny. I mean, just not even, so at any rate, this is the great bifurcation. Thank you for being here and part of this, where you believe in the truth and you believe in following the truth and having discussions about the truth, because it's a lot more interesting. This is where life gets fun. Not everybody can hack it. Those who can convince others, they stay, while those who can't, leave. Just found out today that Rob Reiner had stormed off of Twitter. He couldn't take it. And of course, Rob held a lot of views that were frankly 100% unsupported by reality or data. Like, he insisted that there was an armed insurrection on January 6th, despite the fact that no arms were borne by anybody that day, except for the law enforcement who were sprinkled all throughout that entire crowd doing their agitations. So you're going to see more and more of this, right? And by the way, this larger sweep of things that describes the current mental maladies and social and cultural maladies that just seem to be everywhere, and they're coming fast and furious, and it's hard to even keep up with them sometimes. I get it. But I think I have a larger explanation for why that is. This is for Peak Prosperity subscribers. We're going to talk about something called mousetopia. It's a cool set of experiments run in the 60s and 70s. We're going to draw ours from Universe 25. I think this begins to help us understand where we're going. And by the way, this mouse experiment also, if we believe it and carry it through and extrapolate it into human territory, we have a lot of darkness before us. And it's only going to be because of the brave actions of a few people out there that we could possibly turn this to a different direction, because the default setting we're on is for our own self-destruction. And I'm going to explain all of that coming up next for my subscribers. Until then, thanks everybody. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you had a fantastic Thanksgiving here in the United States. For everybody else, let's hope that we keep our world peace through as long as possible. With that, I'll see you next time. I'm Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity.